So I'm just coming to the end now. I'm on lesson 94. Währung 90. Lektion. I'm doing my German. This is the book that I got. I did have the old edition, but I just picked up. I started doing this after lesson 49, so I did lesson 50 here. So I did the first wave in the old book, and started the second wave in this book, just because the old book was a little bit too dry for me. So what I'm doing here is I'm here on the 94th lesson here. This is what I call these new editions here with the red pages on the grammatical index. I call this the red edition. It just differentiates the new editions from the old editions. I just wanted to do something where it says, one of the instructions here is that we repeat each sentence aloud. I think I've seen different instructions on the Assimil. It says repeat each sentence several times. And the reason why we do that, one of the reasons that I think anyway, why they want you to do that, is that they want you to organize the words. Obviously in a sentence there are different clauses. There are subordinate clauses and main clauses. What they need you to do, and what you need to see as well, is where you organize what we call thought groups. So there'll be collections of words that express a single thought. So that's what happens when you read out. And you learn to get both the rhythm of the language, which is important in a language like Italian. You need to get that rhythm. All of these languages have different stress timings and different prosody is the word that I'm struggling for. But you really need to get into the idea of putting the collections of words, groups of words, organizing the words in a thought group, which is why they insist, or why they recommend, that you repeat these sentences several times. And you really need to kind of, like anybody, anybody can read the individual words like a robot, but then you need to actually sound more natural. And you need to be a little bit of an actor with this. The TOEFL exam will actually have a section that has a read a passage aloud, and that's really testing how you can make the words, you can read the words and make the words sound like you're saying them for the first time. And that's really what you've got to do. So a little bit of acting going on here. So I've read this, there's a 15 sentences here that we've got, 15 lines that we've got. So warten Sie, wir dürfen noch nicht über die Straße gehen, es ist rot. Ich gehe ja gar nicht, ich warte ja. Ja, aber ich wette, wenn ich nichts gesagt hatte, waren Sie gegangen. So you need to get the different stress and the different intonation. So this is where the translation helps immensely as well. So if you can read the translation of the book, so if you can read the translation and then imagine how you would actually say those words, say those sentences. So yeah, I bet if I hadn't said anything, you would have gone. Ja, aber ich wette, wenn ich nichts gesagt hatte, waren Sie gegangen. Na und? Was wäre daran schlimm gewesen? Es ist kein Auto gekommen. So you need to get that. Es ist kein Auto gekommen. So what? Darum geht es nicht. Worum geht es denn dann? Bei Rot darf man nicht gehen. Gesetzt ist gesetzt. Und Verkehrsregeln sind gesetzt. Sie müssen beachtet werden. Sehen Sie, jetzt dürfen wir gehen. Jetzt ist die Fußgängerampel grün. Halt! Vorsicht, man, die waren fast überfahren worden. So you have to do a little bit of acting. You have to get into the spirit of things a little bit. And you put things into groups. So you wouldn't say, wie konnten Sie denn dann Lastwagen nicht sehen? You would have to say, wie konnten Sie denn den Lastwagen nicht sehen? So there's a little beat. Wie konnten Sie denn den Lastwagen nicht sehen? How could you not have seen the lorry? Wie konnten Sie denn den Lastwagen nicht sehen? So you put emphasis on the noun, the Lastwagen, and then you get that. The longer sentences are a little bit more tricky. Scheint so, aber Gott sei Dank hat wenigstens ihre Schützenengel die Augen offen gehalten. An ihrer Stelle würde ich ihm ein herzliches Dankeschön sagen. So really need to get, when you're asked to read things, it's not completely useless to be reading things, but make sure that you do a little bit of acting. Make sure that you get, you see, and you train your brain to organize the sentence into a thought group and put the different emphasis and put the different beats in the sentence that they would expect in Germans or French or Italians would expect in their native language. It's a little bit difficult to do in these shorter dialogues, especially in something like Assimil when they have a limited amount of time given over to the dialogue, and it doesn't really. It seems a little bit rushed to me, even in some of the advanced, the Using French. It really there's a woman on the Using French book who speaks just so fast, and it really puts me off. But it really sounds like they're trying to, get to the end of the dialogue before the time runs out on the allocated time. Read through the translation. How would you say that in your language? How would you say it in English if you're reading English, reading it in French or whatever? How would you say that sentence? How would you express that sentence? Then say, how would you express? Yeah, I bet that if I hadn't said anything, you would have gone. Ja, aber ich wette, wenn ich nichts gesagt hatte, waren sie gegangen. So think about how you would say it. Don't just read like a robot. Look at how you can organize a sentence into the thought groups. Look at the different places where you're supposed to put beats. Look at the different places where you're supposed to put a collection of words together so that it actually makes sense. That's what I do. Look at thought groups are really important. You need to be able to identify groups of words that come together and that sound together in a group rather than in a phrase rather than individual words. Or else it just sounds weird, and you're not really aiming for the fluency that you should really be aiming for. So push yourself a little bit. Go through it several times until you sound natural, until you can hear yourself sounding natural. Make sure that you put the different emphasis on, as if you're actually, saying the words instead of reading them. It's a good habit to get into. People will do this all the time. People will, when kids have a bedtime story, the adults don't just load a text file up and then get Siri or Cortana to play it back. That's robotic. That's not what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for a certain level of prosody. We're aiming for getting the thought groups identified, and we're looking for the ability to add emphasis on the key parts of the sentence. So when you're reading through, do it several times. That kind of preps your brain for you're not reading it cold, and then you'll be able to add more emphasis, and you'll be able to sound more like a native speaker. So think about how you're going to quote unquote act this dialogue out. It's always a useful activity to use. I do it a lot now because it's just helped immensely with both my speaking and my listening. So when you're reading, don't discount reading, but when you're reading, make sure that you're doing it with some feeling.